Yo, what is going on, guys? XHOUNDISHx here, and today I wanted to talk about the weapon changes coming up in the December update and talk about which weapons could be pretty prominent or solid, at least in PvP. And of course, these are only predictions based on what we know so far, which is essentially that pulse rifles are getting a nerf, auto rifles are being buffed, hand cannons are getting the target acquisition buff, and scouts remain pretty much the same. So the weapons I'm going to talk about are in no particular order. They're just weapons that I think could be pretty good, or kind of are interesting at least to discuss their potential in the update. And the weapons also will act as kind of an anchor or a starting point for weapons of their archetype as well. So I may mention some weapons, but I'm kind of referring to weapons that are very similar to them as well, and all the potential that those weapons might have after this update. So I'm going to start out anyway with the xHOUNDISHx regime, because of course back in the day this was one of the most powerful weapons in Destiny PvP for a very long time, and then of course it gets nerfed to non-existence, which is always the way with anything that's very strong for a long time. It did make a slight return in 2.0 before the Taken King, but I wouldn't consider it to be absolute top tier at all. It probably is, as far as auto rifles go, it's pretty damn high, but pulse rifles have just kind of dominated that space. However, in the December update, xHOUNDISHx is getting a 3% increase to base damage and other weapons of the same variant as well, which doesn't sound like that much, but when you consider it's fairly solid right now, and its top competitor of pulse rifles are being nerfed down to, you know, broadly around about an 8% nerf on most pulse rifles. So I think it's set to be at the very least balanced, and will perform pretty well against most pulse rifles or hand cannon medium to close range. And when you consider as well that xHOUNDISHx supercell style of kind of auto rifles, which are the higher rate of fire and slightly lower impact, are getting a 7% buff, which is going to fortify that variant quite a lot. And I feel like auto rifles are going to be pretty damn solid now in PvP, which is cool because for a very long time they've been pretty subpar. So that is xHOUNDISHx regime. I think it could be a pretty damn solid weapon. I think it's going to be pretty up there in terms of general primary weapons in PvP. So that is xHOUNDISHx regime. Up next is the Minor Multi-Tool, which is coming to year 2 as part of the December update, of course. It's already an incredibly competitive PvP weapon. It's very, very strong, pretty flexible for a scout as well, very usable in close range, and still pretty effective at very long ranges. And its main contender right now, and the second longest range kind of primary weapons, are pulse rifles, which again are being nerfed by broadly around about 8%, which is going to make scouts, I think, dominate the mid to long range in PvP, which of course is what they're supposed to do. It's just that I feel like pulse rifles were capable of competing at ranges that they probably shouldn't, to be honest, or they've just been way too powerful. So when you think about hand cannons and autos, they'll definitely contend at the close range, but I feel that they kind of cause less flinch than the pulse rifles did. The pulse rifles really cause this massive flinch that I feel, you know, we haven't seen out of hand cannons and auto rifles necessarily in Destiny PvP. So I feel like scout rifles, and Mida in particular, is going to perform very well even in that closer range combat. And when you think that, you know, the range of hand cannons, auto rifles, and then the changes to pulse rifles, longer range combat definitely could be kind of dominated by scout rifles in PvP right now. So it's looking very good for scouts in general, and especially the Mida Multi-Tool. So I would look out for Mida in the December update. And this next one's pretty interesting. It is Grasp of Malak. So Grasp of Malak is already pretty solid in PvP. It does struggle to compete with the flexibility of things like Hawksaw and No One's Mercy, but of course Grasp is one of the lower impact, high rate of fire pulse rifles in Destiny. So this is actually having the lowest damage reduction across all pulse rifles. So this style of pulse rifle, Grasp in particular, is only having a 2% damage decrease, which is not a lot compared to the others. And when you think that this already can compete in a lot of PvP, it could make Grasp style pulse rifles, Grasp in particular, one of the stronger variants of pulse rifle. And I feel like it will compete pretty well in that close range with auto rifles and hand cannons, but also depending on kind of what roles you've got on it as well. If you've got decent range, it could be pretty solid at medium long range against hand cannons and pulse rifles. But like I said before, I feel like scouts are going to be a lot more dominant. But it will be interesting to see how things like Grasp of Malak perform. I feel like Hawksaw and Bad Juju style pulses will probably perform similarly to auto rifle damage in kind of you know, close range, but also pulse rifles do have a bit more range, so they'll probably feel fairly similar to auto rifles in terms of like time to kill and how much damage they actually do, but they're probably going to be more flexible in range. But anyway, that's Grasp of Malak. I think it could be a pretty solid, even more of a contender in terms of pulse rifles than it is right now. And the next weapon I wanted to talk about is Finala's Peril, which is probably the best all-round legendary hand cannon in Destiny right now. Kind of similar to AS Luna. You probably get one of those with pretty good rolls and it will perform, you know, around about the same, because they do have very similar base stats. It's quite similar to a Hawk Moon, but I feel like Finala's Peril performs pretty damn well in PvP right now for a hand cannon. It's got pretty high range and strong target acquisition as well. And when I've been using this weapon, it feels like it can compete. If you land your shots, it can really compete with a lot of the pulse rifles compared to other hand cannons, which are much harder to use right now. And hand cannon ADS accuracy is actually being buffed, and when you couple that with its current performance and the nerfs to pulse rifles, which are already the biggest threat to weapons like this, I think you could actually see Finala's Peril and similar hand cannons doing pretty well in PvP now, which is cool. There's a lot of kind of things going for these hand cannons, at least if you kind of look at the facts of what we know is happening in the December update. So that's pretty damn cool. So hand cannons in general right now, I think it's hard to predict how they will perform, but there's a very strong chance of improvement. I'm pretty certain that hand cannons will be in a much better place after the December update than they are right now. So that is Finala's Peril, and you know, any other very similar hand cannons, because Finala's is right in the sweet spot. It's basically the Fatebringer, the Hawk Moon. The stats, you know, are right up there. So I think this could be a pretty solid PvP hand cannon very soon. The last weapon I wanted to talk about is Plan C, which is the only non-primary weapon kind of in this list, but it's also fusion rifles in general are kind of, it's an interesting discussion right now, because of course shotguns are being nerfed a hell of a lot in the December update, which could make fusion rifles popular in PvP again, because in year one there was a kind of, earlier on in year one there was a point when fusion rifles were very, very popular indeed. And you know, I think Plan C has a great balance of the charge rate and impact, which has always been what's made it kind of generally popular, easier and more viable to use as a fusion rifle. You know, it's not a super nuanced, tricky fusion rifles to use or anything like that. It's just a solid, you know, great performing fusion rifle. And of course it was very popular in its day also because it has very good strong target acquisition. So I'm curious to see whether this will return when shotguns are kind of not so popular. We will have to see exactly how much changes with shotguns and how they feel to use in PvP, and how many people do, you know, still use them. But everything suggests they're going to be pretty damn crap essentially compared to what they are now, which I think could bring fusion rifles kind of back into an interesting place, along with sidearms, of course, which are a newer thing in Destiny. I feel like sidearms will be a lot more popular, which is cool also, but I'm more interested as to whether, you know, Plan C and fusion rifles will make a return, because they've kind of become not the most popular thing at all in PvP, which is a big switch up from being one of the most popular special weapons. So that is Plan C. But anyway, guys, I just wanted to talk about, you know, some weapons that will absolutely be strong after this update, and some other ones that have the potential to be, you know, such as the Plan C and things like that, are kind of an interesting discussion point. So let me know down below any weapons that you think are going to be really strong after the update, or any weapons that you're hoping will be, and that you're really looking forward to using more in PvP and being more viable in PvP, because the meta is about to really switch up. You know, I feel like this is going to make a lot of changes to how people play, because not only primaries are being brought back in line, but the special weapons, shotguns in particular, are, you know, changing fairly drastically. It's got to be the biggest change that we've had ever, you know, across the board for shotguns. So hope you have enjoyed the videos, guys. If you have, drop me a like and comment down below, like I said. And if you are new to the channel and you want to see more Destiny content, then feel free to hit that subscribe button to see a lot more. But for now, you guys have a great week, and I will catch you very soon. Peace out.